Welcome, everybody. My name is Marty Mascari. I am a contractor under the North Central Texas Area Agency on Aging and the North Central Texas Aging and Disability Resource Center, or ADRC, both of which are under the umbrella of the North Central Texas Council of Governments in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. We are once again very blessed to have Dr. Ron Mottern. He is now with the Texas Health and Human Services, and he's here today to talk about compassion, fatigue, and resiliency. And if you missed yesterday's webinar, you missed a treat. And those will all be ultimately up on our YouTube channel as we are recording these. But before we get started, I'm going to just go over real quick the our CE requirements. So first of all, if you're joining us today for CEUs, we'll do that here. But first, I want to make a note that at the end of Dr. Mottern's handout, there is a link to a questionnaire. He also has what is it?
QR code.
A QR code. Thank you. He also has a QR code on there too. If you want to use the QR code, please fill that out for him. You know, like us, it always helps us when we get feedback to do a better job or know how we're doing. So, but please do that. But for those of you that are looking for CEUs, we're offering complimentary CEUs for licensed social workers and licensed professional counselors in the state of Texas. If you have a different license in Texas or a license outside of Texas, feel free to go through the process and get a certificate. And you can send it to whoever the jurisdiction is that you're under, but please understand there's no guarantee that they'll take it. But you're more than welcome to go through the process. I've had people tell me they've been able to use them. So, but that just so you're doing that at your own risk, I should say. We're also offering certificates of attendance. Those are available, and the guidelines are the same. Today's webinar is worth 1.5 hours of CEU credits. You must complete the entire live webinar in order to qualify. You must stay on here until 3:30 when we're done. You must also complete the Google evaluation survey. Now that's different than Dr. Mottern's. It should pop up as you close out of Zoom. There should be a screen that says, will you take a short survey? And please do that. But if you don't get it there, you'll also get it in an email that I'll send out after today's webinar. We'll send out a follow-up email that will also have that link to it. If you're looking for Dr. Mottern's slides, I mean, he's working off a handout today. That should have come, but I'll put that in the chat here in just a minute. But please remember the Google survey is what you're going to need to fill out if you want CEUs or any kind of certificate, because that's what's going to trigger me to send that to you. The Google evaluation link will be open for a week. And then if you'll give me about 4 weeks to get all those certificates out to you, that would be wonderful. And so I'm going to stop sharing and let Dr. Mottern share. Well, let me stop sharing. There we go. And let Dr. Mottern share his notes, and then I'll turn it over to him.
Okay. Where are we? Here we are. Okay.
Perfect.
There we go. Okay, so what we want to look at today is compassion, fatigue, and resiliency. Yesterday, we looked at cumulative stress and self-care. Now, certainly compassion fatigue is a type of stress, and many of the things that we looked at yesterday apply to today. We're not going to go back over them all again. I may mention them at some point, but we want to look at some other things that will help us with resiliency. So the first thing we want to do is we want to look at what is compassion fatigue, look at the difference between, if any, between compassion fatigue and empathic distress fatigue, then resiliency, and we want to look at the different domains of resiliency. So there's generally several different domains. We have the cognitive domain, we have the behavioral domain, the emotional domain. I've combined both of those because as we start talking about it, I'll explain why I did that. the physical domain, and then the existential or the spiritual domain. So we'll look at all of those domains and things we can do to help us to build resiliency to combat that compassion fatigue that we may have. So what is compassion fatigue? Well, I like that first definition. And on this handout, I've given you lots of information. I'm not going to read all of this to you, okay? But the information is there. But I really like this first one. It's just the progressive and cumulative outcome. Remember, yesterday we were talking about cumulative stress, of prolonged, continuous, and intense contact. Now, this is with patients because it comes from some nursing work on nursing, but it's really anybody who is a caregiver who has to work with people. Anybody in human services, if you're in human services, you work with people, right? So that's sort of the definition of that. So if you're in human services, if you deal with people, whether that's professionally or you're dealing with family members, you know, you have to take care of aging parents or children or spouses or whatever it has to be, you can be included in that as well. But we have this intense contact with these people that leads to really that multidimensional stress, that cumulative stress that we talked about yesterday, that just exceeds my abilities to deal with. Okay, I've just had enough of dealing with people. Right, I've exceeded my limit there. So I think that's sort of inclusive. That sort of covers everything there. Now, there is a difference between compassion fatigue and burnout. Okay. Burnout has to do with areas of, we have a wonderful little acronym, ICE, right? ICE, which we have feelings of inefficacy. We develop cynicism, and then we have exhaustion, both emotional and physical exhaustion. Now, that's a wonderful acronym, but it actually works the other way, right? ECI doesn't spell anything, so it doesn't help us. But it actually occurs, we get physically and mentally exhausted, right? We're dealing with people all the time. We become exhausted. And then that's when we start to get cynical about things, right? What I'm doing doesn't make any difference. People don't care. And then I see that I begin to become ineffective in whatever it is that I'm doing. So it actually works from the bottom up, but it's easier to remember it if we just say ICE. A quick rule of thumb on differentiating between compassion fatigue and burnout is that burnout has to do with where I work. Okay. Compassion fatigue has to do with what I do for a living. Okay. So if I'm a social worker, let's say in ABC organization in Houston, I can leave that organization if I'm feeling burnt out. If I have that burnout, if that's what's going on, I can leave that organization. I can go to work at some, ABC or XYZ in Travis County, and I don't have to may not have to deal with that burnout. Okay, because the things which cause the burnout, the organizational structures, those sorts of things are going to be different from one organization to another, hopefully, when I move. However, if I have compassion fatigue, it does not matter where I go. Okay, if I have compassion fatigue in Houston, and I say, well, I'm just going to move to Austin, and what I'm dealing with is compassion fatigue and not burnout, then it doesn't make any difference. It's still going to be there. Okay. The only thing I can do at that point is find another line of work or develop resiliency. Okay. So I don't just have to quit doing what I love to do, even though I may be a little burnt out on it. I can develop some resiliency skills. We generally develop those, but if we don't sort of nurture them over time, then we tend to lose some of them. And they're sort of like batteries, the more we have to use them, they get drained a little bit. So every now and then we have to go in and re-energize them and what have you. And we can certainly do that. Okay. Just because I may have compassion fatigue does not mean I'm going to have to go find a new field to work in. Okay. It means that I'm going to have to make some changes in my life to develop some resiliency there, some resiliency skills to build that resiliency and then to hold it off too. So if I want to remain, if I like my job, if I having to take care of parents or something like that, I don't have any choice in that, then I want to build resiliency skills so that I don't get compassion fatigue, right? So that's not a good thing. So burnout and compassion fatigue, really two different things. We do have a training on burnout, and I believe we're doing that one here on the 30th of the month. Okay, I generally encourage managers to attend that burnout meeting because they're the ones who make a difference in the system, right? Burnout, like I said, has a lot to do with organizational systems and what have you. And if you're an individual employee, you don't really have a say over those, right? You got to be in a position to where you can make some changes on that. But we do have that training coming up on the 30th for the burnout. Now, for us today, we're going to follow this literature that I've cited here that sort of has compassion fatigue, rather synonymous with secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. Now, everybody does not look at it that way. Let me just say that. If you learned it a different way, that's fine. Okay, I'm aware of the differences. In fact, some people view secondary trauma very differently from vicarious trauma. Okay, those are two different things. We're going to follow the research I have on the handout that says that we're just going to consider them synonymous for now. We're dealing with people. We're dealing with them on a regular basis, and we're taking that stuff on, right? So we're sort of that secondary trauma, that vicarious, that stuff that sort of rubs off on us. That's how we're going to look at it based on the citations that I have for you here. I'm wondering if anybody has ever heard of empathic distress fatigue. Okay. I don't think I've had anybody, and I've given this training many times, and I don't think I've ever had anybody who's heard of it. Okay. If you have, good for you. Okay. But in about 2017, they came out with this push to make compassion fatigue for people to start calling that empathic distress fatigue. Now, the reasons for that were pretty good, right? The reasons for it were is we were able to look inside the brain, and we know that there was two different sort of pathways that things went through. One was the sort of compassion pathway, and the other one was the empathy pathway. Pathway. And what we found out is that when we're talking about compassion fatigue, what we're actually talking about is the empathy pathway. Okay. Now, when compassion fatigue was named, at the time we couldn't look in the brain, we couldn't see what was going on. So, these days we can do that. We can do that in real time. We can see blood flow, we can see electrical activity, we can see what parts of the brain are working with what other parts of the brain and what have you. So we know now that what began as compassion fatigue is actually on the empathy pathway. And in fact, how you treat empathic distress fatigue is through the teaching of compassion. Okay. A little graph there for you on that. But that never really caught on. Okay. I throw that in there just for your own edification. If you happen to come across it in the literature, if you happen to be someplace and somebody's talking about empathic distress fatigue, just know that they're talking about compassion fatigue. Okay. It's the same thing. Like I said, the empathic distress fatigue is probably a little more accurate just based on physically what's going on in the brain and what have you. But it just never caught on. That compassion fatigue has been around for too long for that. Okay. So we have this compassion fatigue, and that includes many things. That includes some of the aspects of burnout as well. Like I said, burnout's a different thing, but if I have compassion fatigue, I can feel ineffective in what I can do. And I can have that cynicism, and I can have that mental or physical exhaustion that goes along that. So don't think those are separate, right? Compassion fatigue may very well include those aspects of it, as well as aspects of anxiety or even hypervigilance, depending on what the circumstances are, depression, symptoms of that, and things of that nature. So all of these can be aspects of compassion fatigue. Okay, like I said, compassion fatigue, I'm at the end of my rope. Right, dealing with people, I'm at the end of my. I don't want to do that anymore. I've had it. Okay. So everything that goes along with being at that place and having to get up and go do it every day, right? You know that feeling. You may have worked in a position where, I really don't want to get up in the morning and have to go deal with this. And when I do, doesn't put me in the best frame of mind, right? So that's the compassion fatigue. And we can change that. We can deal with that. We don't have to be at the mercy of that. In fact, there's a wonderful, we have a Wednesday stress management group that I do for the state. And today we looked at a video. It was a TEDx talk by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who wrote the book on how emotions are made. That was the name of her book, How Emotions Are Made. She studied that for many decades. She goes through that. If you get a chance to see it, it's on, go to YouTube, which is your stress and compassion management friend. Go to YouTube, look up Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. And I believe the title of the TEDx thing is You're Not at the Mercy of Your Emotions. Okay. So look that up. But we know that we can change this compassion fatigue. Okay. There are things that we can do by building resilience. Now, what is resiliency? Resiliency is just the ability to bounce back from adversity. Okay. I'm at the end of my rope, my batteries are drained, and resiliency sort of recharges those batteries, gives me some more rope that I'm not swinging at the end of it. Right. So that's what resiliency is. Um, there are different aspects of resiliency. We call these domains. There are different domains of resiliency. Depending on who you talk to, they'll be different. Most of them are covered here today. Some have more, some have less. But one of those is the cognitive domain. Now, if you were with us yesterday, you'll remember that I told you that yesterday we sort of looked at the behavioral stuff. Today we're going to look at the cognitive stuff, right? We have a cognitive behavioral sort of approach. So yesterday was the behavioral stuff. Today is the cognitive stuff. So a lot of people find this to be boring. I find it to be fascinating, but that's just me. Hopefully my enthusiasm will rub off on you. When we look at this cognitive domain, we're going to be looking at things like cognitive restructuring, which is a big word for how do I change my thinking? Okay. Cognitive thinking, restructure something, I change it. Right? Just changing my thinking is what it is. But we need to know how to do that. We do that all the time about many different things, but not very often do we do metacognition, right? We don't think about our thinking. We don't think about how I go about changing my thinking. But when I get into this compassion fatigue, then I need to start paying attention to that. I need to start practicing some behavioral skills, but I also need to start changing my thinking because remember, I may be, very cynical at this point, right? Because I'm at the end of my rope. We also want to look at identification and correction of thinking errors, these cognitive distortions. I really like the word thinking traps because that describes exactly what they do. It's a very descriptive term. It's like a bear trap, that if I'm using one of these cognitive distortions, if I step in this trap, I'm held there. Okay. Until I get rid of it, until I decide to do something about it and change it, then I'm stuck there. And that's the way that things are just going to be for me. And that's not always a pleasant place to be, especially if I've got those feelings of anxiety and depression and things like that. Not a good place to be. So I want to do something to change those. We're going to look at some problem solving as well. Now, I know that most of you are probably very good problem solving. You may be very good at all of this stuff. But what we found is that people can be very good at things in one setting and not very good at them in another setting. Okay. In fact, a lot of what we're looking at here, how to build resiliency and how to deal with these sorts of things, were used by the military. And you can imagine what that was like when you're, an officer in the military and you're a colonel or something and you go to work and you tell people to do something and they say, yes, sir. And they jump right on it, right? They're going to do that. Now you go home and try that. And that leads to some problems. So this is what the military was finding out is, people, did very well in one situation, but they might not have done very well in another situation. So we may use these skills. And I've had that personal reflection from people as well who've gone through the training and they said, I realized, I was very empathetic at work. When I had to, I'm a therapist or whatever, and I deal with people, but when I get home, you know what? I'm not the best in the world at practicing that with my family. So we need to pay attention to that we're using this across the board because this compassion fatigue, if I'm tired of dealing with people, it doesn't matter who people are. Okay. I'm tired of dealing with them. And so that can lead me to some problems at home, even though I may be doing fairly well at work, able to hide it a little bit. It's certainly showing up in other places where I'm not as guarded. Also in the cognitive domain is what's called energy management. Okay. And the energy management stuff is everything we looked at yesterday. Okay. So this includes the energy management stuff includes things like diaphragmatic breathing, which we did yesterday, the EFT tapping, that emotional freedom techniques, the tapping techniques. It includes that. It includes the mindfulness meditation, the relaxation response, autogenic training, biofeedback, everything that we went over yesterday is covered in energy management. So I'm not gonna re-go over that stuff today. We did that yesterday. If we have time, I might do a little bit of it, but but that's what we're looking at, and that's in the cognitive domain once again. Okay, so then we have some other domains that we want to look at as we go forward. Now, one good example of something in the cognitive domain is something called the 4 questions. Okay, this is used, this is classical cognitive therapy, okay? Let me just start out by telling you that, but it's used by someone who would never call it that at all, okay? It's used by, some of you may be familiar with Byron Katie, okay? She's a woman out in California. She wrote a book called The Work. She's got several books. The Work was her original one. And in fact, her website is thework.com. And you can go there and you can get this particular exercise, a little bit more information on it, as well as some of her other exercises. Now, what she's doing is cognitive restructuring. But like I said, she would never call it cognitive restructuring. Okay. Um, because I've done cognitive restructuring for 25 years or so, I know it when I see it, right? So I know that's what she's doing, but she's not saying that she's doing that. But this is exactly what this is, okay? And this is what you do. This is, yeah, identify a situation that I'm in that's causing me a problem, okay? And I just want to isolate one thought about that situation. So one common one, if I get in compassion fatigue, something that I often hear, okay, uh, when we do some cognitive restructuring, we're going to do some more of it in just a minute, a little bit more elaborate form. But this one right here, one common thing that people usually shout out is, people, I'm tired of dealing with people. Okay. I'm just tired of dealing with them. Okay. I don't want to do it anymore. Sometimes that takes the form of people suck. Okay. People just, like I said, they're at the end of their rope. That's what they say. Okay. That's not me. I'm just quoting here. Okay. They've had enough of it, dealing with it. So if you have, let's just say people don't care. Okay. Let's just say that. So if we do that, then I apply these 4 questions. So what's my situation? Well, people don't care anymore. And when I have to deal with people in my job, whatever it happens to be, whether it's professionally or whether I'm doing it as a caregiver at home or whatever it happens to be, people just don't care about it. Okay. The people I'm working with don't care. Okay. The first question is that true? Is that true that people don't care what you're doing for them, what you're doing with them? Is that really true? Well, it certainly seems like it's true. That's the impression I'm getting, right? Okay, all right. So, second question, do you absolutely know that it's true? Have they told you, I don't care? Okay. You absolutely know that, or are you doing a little mind reading here, which is a cognitive distortion? Are you just sort of putting some things out there that maybe is going on with you and maybe not with them? Well, okay. Well, I guess that I don't absolutely know that it's true. They're acting like it's not true, but I don't absolutely know that for a fact. Okay, so if you don't know that for a fact, okay, if you don't know that it's absolutely true, how do you feel when you think that it is true? Well, that makes me feel angry. It makes me feel upset. It makes me feel frustrated. It makes me feel, I just don't want to do this anymore. I got into this job to help people, and now it's just people don't care. So I don't want to do what I do, and that makes me feel very bad. Okay, feel very frustrated in my job and what have you. Okay, so because this isn't a fact that they don't care, you can change that and think, what if they did care? What would you feel if you thought something different? Okay. Well, I don't know. If I thought they cared, that might give me a little more hope, right? It might boost me up a little more. Wouldn't feel so frustrated in my life. Okay. Well, it's your choice, right? Because you don't know that that's a fact. You're just assuming that it is. Okay. You haven't, they haven't said that that's what it is. I just base that on it's sort of a prediction, a mental prediction based on past experience and what have you. If you watch that video by Dr. Barrett, she'll talk a lot about that. But this is what I'm based on my situation and what I'm getting from people. Think, I think that they don't care. Okay. Now, if they really do or not, I don't know. So my choice to view them as not caring is just that. It's my choice. I can view that as maybe this is the only way they know how to act. Maybe they don't know how to show anything else. Okay. Maybe they really do care. They just don't know how to do that, how to show that. Okay. I can choose to look at that differently. Now, this is classical cognitive restructuring. Okay. Cognitive restructuring has three aspects to it. Okay. Number one is that I have to pay attention to my thoughts and feelings. We have 50 to 70,000 thoughts going through our head a day. Rarely do we pay attention to them. We don't spend a lot of time on metacognition. I don't ask myself as I go through the day, what was I thinking when I was doing that? Okay, I just do that, right? I'm always thinking, okay, because I'm always doing something, but I don't stop and think about my thinking. But that's what we have to do in the cognitive restructuring. If I'm feeling, okay, this fatigue, if I'm feeling this anxiousness, this overwhelmed with having to deal with people as I move forward, I have to do something about that. And all of that is caused by how I'm choosing to think about this. Now, I don't want you to get the idea that we're discounting emotions. Okay. We're not doing that. You feel what you feel, okay, about this. But we can sort of work with things to change the way we feel, to modify that. One of the ways to do that is through the thinking. The other way is through behavior. Okay. So in reality therapy, for example, we view a model of total behavior. We view that as a car, as a front wheel drive car. The front wheels move the car, right? The front wheels on that car, over which we always have direct control, are thinking and doing. Okay, so I have direct control over my thinking and doing, but I have indirect control over the back wheels. They go wherever the front wheels take them. And those back wheels are emotions and physiology. So nobody's discounting feelings. Feelings are always a part. These emotions are always a part of what's going on with me every second of every day. Okay, they're a part of that car, of my car. Okay, I can't go without that wheel. Right? If I try to drive without a wheel, I'm just going to go in a circle. Okay, so those are always a part of that, but I can change what I think. I can change what I do to influence those back wheels, both emotionally and physically. And you'll notice that those back wheels, wheels are on the same axle. So physiologically, what is going on with me, and emotionally, what is going on with me. That's why we often see that, not only am I getting fatigued and worn out and those sorts of feeling, but that feeling worn out, that exhaustion is not only mental, but also physical as well. Okay. So we can do things about those. We can do it, and we can access it through the behavior, which is what we did yesterday. Those are those energy management exercises, or we can access it, well, and/or we can access it through the cognitive restructuring, changing our thinking. Now, I want to share something else right quick, another example of this cognitive restructuring. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second and share something else with you here. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this new thing that we're looking at. This is a cognitive example of how to do the cognitive restructuring. Okay, has the 3 steps to it. So step number 1, pay attention to my thoughts and feelings, right? And I have to write these things down. Now, when I change my thinking, I do that in my head, right? That just happens in my head. But in order to recognize what the thoughts are that may be causing me the compassion fatigue, I need to write those down, because if I don't, then I can oftentimes fool myself with the thinking. Okay, I can overlook thinking. I can I can think the same thought several times, right? That may show that it's very significant, but I'm just not aware of I'm using it several times. So this situation. So we need to define a situation. There are 4 parts to this: situation, thoughts, feelings, beliefs. Okay, so the situation, and this is not in your handout. Okay, so pay attention if you're interested. The situation, I feel depressed and angry when I think about my work. Okay, so classic sort of compassion fatigue, right? I'm feeling depressed that I got to do this. I'm frustrated. I'm angry about what I have to do. So that's the situation. And the situation needs to be brief and objective. So that's pretty brief. Okay. I feel depressed and angry when I think about my work. And it's objective. I'm always the authority on what I feel, right? On what I think and what I feel. So if I say I'm depressed and angry, then I'm depressed and angry. The next part is I have to identify my thoughts and I have to identify all of them. I don't have problems because I don't recognize big risk thoughts. And when I say risk thoughts, I mean thoughts that are causing me compassion fatigue or general problems in my life. I know what those are, right? If I'm thinking, I know what that, when I think this, it's like, that's not a good thought, but it's what I'm thinking. Okay. But it's the little ones that lead up to the big ones. That's where we can sort of identify those and we can start changing them there. Because when I find myself in people don't care, people don't really care, people suck, I don't want to change my thinking, right? I'm too far gone at that point. Okay. I don't want to change that. So I need to catch myself before I get up that ladder. Okay. When I'm sort of closer to the bottom. Okay. So these are some common thoughts that I've done these live for many years. Okay. So I'm just drawing on things that people have said. Well, people never seem to learn, right? I mean, that's part of why I'm frustrated, right? If they just do what I told them, they'd be much better off. Okay. I'm not making any difference in what I do, probably because they're not listening to me. But uh, now I'm working with my clients' children and their children's children. So I got in this to make a change in society. Oftentimes, if I go in it as a healthcare worker, a social worker, something like that, I want to make a difference in society. That's part of the reason that I do that. And then I get in there and I find, not only am I working with them, but then one day, oh, you worked with my mother. Okay, really? So now I'm working with their kids, and you're in the business long enough, and you're working with, grandchildren of people you originally worked with. So that can be sort of defeating, right? You're saying I'm not making any difference in what I'm doing here. Okay, but that's what I'm thinking at any rate. So the cycle will never be broken. This is, I'm not going to make any difference. And then this one, once again, is one of those that come out. People don't want help. Okay. These people just don't want help. They don't want to listen to what I say. They'll never change. And I should be spending my time in an area where I can really make a difference. And if I don't use this cognitive restructure and other of these skills that we have to build resiliency, then that's going to be the one that's going to be my best option, right? I'm either going to build resiliency or I've got to find something else to do. I've got to find another line of work. And most people who are in a field where you can get compassion fatigue are there because they want to help people, right? That's the reason I got in this field, is because I want to help people, right? So that's not a good place to be. And I'd like to continue to do that, but I'm going to have to develop some resiliency skills. And this is one of them. Now, I want to identify my feelings as well. And by feelings, I mean emotions. I'm not really talking about physical feelings so much. Those can sometimes be useful, but as far as this goes, generally, talking about emotions. Okay. So when I'm feeling emotionally exhausted. Okay. When I have this thinking, it's causing me to feel emotionally exhausted. I feel frustrated. I feel useless. I feel underutilized. Okay. Might have some worthless feelings in there, right? I've wasted my life on doing this and haven't made any difference in things. Okay. So the reason I want to put emotions down here, because I just told you that, we make our own emotions. Emotions uh, aren't just there. We don't have, in immutable emotion circuits in the brain. Those do not exist. Okay. We build emotions, we construct them. So why are we looking at this? Okay, why are we putting feelings down? Well, we're putting it down because it acts as a double check on my thinking. If I have a thought up here that obviously causes me to feel some way, but I don't have the feeling, then I probably need to put that feeling down there, and vice versa. If I have a feeling down here, say underutilized, I'm feeling underutilized, then what's the thought that's causing that? Okay. Now, we can probably identify a couple of them up here that are causing that. But if I have a feeling down here that I don't have the thought for, then that tells me I'm not getting to all of my thinking. I need to pay more attention to my thinking and just ask myself, well, what am I thinking that's caused me to feel that way? Okay. And it may be several different things. This is just a brief one. Let me just say, people who have done this for a long time can come up with pages of these. Most of the time, the first time you do a thinking report, if you can come up with 3 thoughts, a couple feelings, you're doing pretty good. Okay. Just sort of intermediate here. But I have the feelings, do those, use those as sort of a double check. And the other reason is that sometimes I'm just more aware of what I'm feeling than I am of what I'm thinking, right? I know that I'm feeling frustrated, or I know that I'm emotionally exhausted. And that tells me that, you know what? I better start looking at my thinking and change my thinking. Otherwise, I'm going to get this compassion fatigue, or I'm going to get even further into compassion fatigue. I need to change that and build some resiliency. So the next part of it is I want to look at beliefs. Now, people always have a hard time with beliefs. Anytime that I catch myself saying should or ought, things should be this way, people ought to be this way, anytime I'm using those categorical statements, that tells me that I'm probably on the trail of a belief. Okay. So if I catch myself saying must, things must be this way, then I know definitely that I'm on a trail of a belief there. Okay. But I may, as I look at this, the beliefs are more thinking, but they're the thinking behind the thinking. All these thoughts up here is the little self-talk I've got going inside my head. Okay. At the moment, when I'm in this situation, I have this little self-talk going. These beliefs are unconscious. Okay. The beliefs are not something I'm hearing in my head. So when I get to the beliefs part, I get to play amateur psychologist, right? And say, well, why am I thinking this, right? Why am I really get to do some metacognition there, play an amateur psychologist, unless you are one, okay, in which case you can play a real one. But just apply it to yourself, right? Well, why am I thinking this? And I may come up with something, well, people should listen to me. Now, one of the things is to get down to core beliefs, then one of the things I want to do is I want to ask myself why. Now, I don't want to ask anybody else why. Classic therapy 101, right? No, never ask anybody why, right? But I can do that with myself, right? I can ask myself why uh, when I do this. So people should listen to me. Well, why do I think people should listen to me? Well, I should be recognized for my knowledge and skills. Well, that makes sense, right? I have a lot of experience of this. People ought to listen to me. People ought to do what I tell them to do. Okay. All right. Well, why should you be recognized for your knowledge and skills? Why should you be? Well, I have worth. Okay. In what I do, I have some, some standing. I've done a lot of study or have a lot of experience in this. And so I have some worthwhile things to recommend me. So that's just an example of beliefs that I would do. Okay. Now, all of that was step one of paying attention to my thoughts and feelings. Okay. It doesn't take very long to do these things. Like I said, once you get in the habit of them, then it goes pretty quickly. The next part, however, step number 2 is to recognize the risk in my thoughts and feelings. And remember, when I say risk, what I'm talking about here is thoughts that cause me to feel this compassion fatigue. Okay. These thoughts that cause me to feel this anxiousness, this frustration in what I'm doing, all of this stuff. Those are what are risky for me. And of course, my risk is I'm going to have to find something else to do with my life because I can't stay here feeling this way. So I want to identify that. And I just put the ones that are risky. You can just, if you're writing it on a piece of paper, you can just put a star by them or a tick mark or something like that. But because I can, I just put them in red right here. So these people never seem to learn. Is that a risky? Does that sort of lead me to feeling compassion fatigue? Well, yeah. Okay. If they just do what I tell them to do, they'd be much better off. Yes, that's risky on a number of levels, especially if you're a professional. Okay. Probably need some supervision at that point and talk to some peers or something like that, just talk it out a little bit. When I start wanting to make other people do what I want them to do, not in a good place. I'm not making a difference with what I'm doing. Okay. Yeah, that's a bad one. In fact, most of the ones that we put down here are bad. Now, if you look at all of your thinking, this is for brevity, right? You look at all of your thinking, we may have all of these red ones, but there may be a whole lot more that aren't risky going on at the same time. But just for brevity, I just put the risky ones here. Emotions, which one of these are risky for me? That means which one of these contribute to that compassion fatigue? All of them. Okay, all of them. What about the beliefs? Now, let me remind you, when you're looking at beliefs, you're not looking for good or bad beliefs. Okay. I worked in correctional counseling for many years. Okay. Still work with justice involved individuals. Okay. And rarely have I ever come across a bad belief. Okay. So, for example, in that situation, I may be dealing with somebody who is there for, robbery or theft or something like that. And we start looking at doing the cognitive work, and we start looking at this, and they come up with a belief of a man should take care of his family. Well, is that a bad belief? No. I wish more people had it, right? In our society today, I want more people to have that belief. How he chooses to go about that, however, is the problem. Okay, so when we start looking at corrections for that, then the corrections and the beliefs, because you're spending your time with me, if you're seeing me, you're not in a place where you're taking care of your family. Okay, so but the beliefs are not bad. We're not looking for good and bad beliefs here. Like I said, I've worked with some serious justice involved individuals over the years, and rarely have I come up with a bad belief. Okay, so we're not looking for good and bad. We're looking for, is this risky? Can this belief contribute to my feelings of compassion fatigue? And yes, they can in these. Okay, so step number 3 is to replace those risky thoughts, those thoughts that may lead me into um, um, compassion fatigue, with thoughts to lead me into resiliency. Okay, so what are some resilient thoughts I can have that can get me out of this compassion fatigue? So these people never seem to learn. Well, people do learn, and I've seen it happen, right? So remember those 4 questions when I said, are you absolutely sure? Well, some people, I have seen people who are thankful. I have seen people who learn. Okay. So I can't say for certain. So people do learn. I've seen it happen. They just did what I told them to do, they'd be much better off. Well, some people just learn the hard way, right? Some people have to go through that experience, okay? And it's their experience. My job to make suggestions, okay? If I'm worried about controlling other people, then I need to step back for a minute. I'm not making a difference. Is that true? And this is the 4 questions, right? Is that really true? Oh, well, no. Okay. I do make a difference. I know that I have helped people before, that people I've helped in the past have come back and told me, thank you. This has helped me. Okay. So sometimes that's just down the road a bit, but I know I contributed to the process. Okay. Cycle will never be broken. It can be broken. I play my part in it. Okay. May not happen with me. May not happen on my watch. Okay. They may be working with somebody else down the road, but I played a part in that. The learning tends to be cumulative, right? So these people don't want help. Very risky thought there. They don't understand how what I'm telling them will help them. Okay. Maybe I need to explain things in a different way instead of just the one way that I have, right? Okay. Maybe I need to explain things in a different way. People will never change. Another very risky one. Well, they can learn the procedures that lead to change, which we'll look at in a minute. I'm contributing to that critical mass that is eventual change. And I should be spending my time someplace where I can make a difference. I make a difference here. And I've got proof of that in the past. People have told me, thank you, that what I've done has helped them. So that's the cognitive restructuring part of that. Now, trick questions. I'm not going to change these emotions right here directly. Why? Because emotions are caused by thinking. And when I change that thinking, when I start thinking, I'm making an important contribution to these people. They do learn. Eventually, hopefully, they'll get it. That makes me feel energized, calm, useful, engaged. And when I get to the beliefs, once again, I'm not going to try. Number one, I can't flip the belief anyway. If I believe one thing, I can't believe its opposite. But I can change this. People should listen to me. Well, the only thing I can control is what I choose to think and do. So I can choose to approach this differently or continue with where I am. I should be recognized for my knowledge and skills. Well, when I'm useful, I'm recognized, right? People do recognize me. They do come back and thank me for that. I'm a person of worth. My worth is seen in by others and how they choose to, and how I choose to help them. My worth is seen by others. Sorry, others in there. By others and how I choose to help them. Okay, so maybe I need to change the way I'm doing things here. So when I get this green thinking going, right? When I've identified this red thinking, when I catch myself thinking the red stuff, that's when I have to stop myself and say, you know what? I need to change that thinking. What am I going to think that's going to get me into resiliency and start thinking the green stuff? Okay. So it's cognitive restructuring. Let me stop this share here and go back to the other one. Yeah. Okay, so that's an example of the cognitive restructuring. As we went through that, hopefully everybody's still awake. Okay, but as we went through that, you'll see how those 4 questions are sort of used in that. Once again, this is a classical cognitive therapy. Okay, we want to also, one of the things that leads us into compassion fatigue is the thinking errors. There are many different ones of those. One common one that we have is emotional reasoning, making decisions based on feelings. That can make me very upset and anxious. An example of that is I just wake up and I'm mad at the world in the morning, right? I just wake up and I'm angry. Okay. It doesn't seem like there's any reason that the water takes too long to heat up in the shower. The toast takes longer in the microwave and I'm in a hurry. Catch my pocket in the doorknob on the way out. And the only time that ever happens is when I'm already upset, right? So I just look at the world through these glasses that I put on, these anger glasses that I got up and put on in the morning. Well, how do I change that? Well, I have to get out of that trap, okay? And I do that by just asking myself, you know, what's the facts on this? You know, I'm making decisions based on feelings. What are the facts? Did the water really take longer to heat up? Was anybody else, you know, using the water before me? That might explain it if it was, but probably not, right? Did the toaster take longer in the toaster? Did the toast take longer in the toaster to get done? You know, toasters are really simple machines and there's not a lot of variation, right? You probably set a watch by those things, right? So no, it took probably about the same time as it always takes for that toast to get done. Okay. So I just look at those things and say, you know what, I'm in this thinking error. I'm deciding on feelings. I'm not paying attention to the facts, and I need to change that thinking if I want to move forward. Otherwise, if I stay in that thinking, I can be upset all day long. Okay. Now, let me just say that sometimes it's best just to go back to bed. Okay. You know, I was reading a book recently. It was written in the 17th century, I think. It's called The Art of Worldly Wisdom, okay, by Balthazar Gracian. He was a Spanish Jesuit. And one of his maxims in there that he has in a book full of maxims, one of his maxims is learn to recognize bad days. He said, some days you just need to go back to bed. Things aren't going to get any better. Okay. So sometimes I just need to learn to recognize those, go back to bed. Hopefully my thinking will change if I allow myself some rest. So, and the more, you know, the more compassion fatigue I have, the more of that I may have to do. So, and that won't help me in my job. So every now and then, you know, it's just things aren't going to get any better. It's not going to do me any good to go in because I'm just going to mess up whatever it is I'm working on today. Okay. Another one of these things that we can do is problem solving. Like I said, most of you are probably very good problem solvers in your lives already, but sometimes we use them in one situation that we don't use them in another situation. But the problem solving module we're looking at here is the WDEP cycle. These are the procedures that lead to change. And you can use this for anything. Okay. There are questions that I ask myself for each of these. So in the wants part, I ask myself, what do I want in this situation? If we use the same situation, you know, I feel like I'm ineffective in my work. I don't like my work anymore. That's the situation that I find myself in. So what do you want? I want to feel like I did when I started. Okay. I want to care about my job. I want to care about people. I want to feel like I'm making a difference in what I do. Okay. What are you doing to get closer to that? And well, I'm doing the same thing every day that I did the day before. Okay. If that's what I'm doing, what do you think your chances are of getting anything different? You know, what's the definition of insanity, right? I do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? What do I want to do about this? What am I doing to get closer? I have to do something different in my life. once I've chosen that something different, I have to look at some evaluation of it and ask myself, well, is what you're doing getting you closer to what you want? As I practice some of these behavioral skills that we used yesterday, these stress management skills, the energy management skills, as I use those, as I practice this cognitive restructuring, even though I may think it's boring, okay, if I practice that in my life, is it getting me closer? Do I feel a little better about what I'm doing? Am I able to sort of pull myself out of this compassion fatigue and feel a little bit more resilient, like I want to actually get up and go to work in the morning? Then that's good, right? That's what I want. If what I'm doing is working for me, what do I want to do about that? Well, that's my plan. I want to continue doing it, right? The other thing in the evaluation, however, is what I'm doing hurting me or others? Okay. So if what I'm doing is hurting me, if what I'm doing is hurting others, not a good choice. Okay. And I need to find something different. For example, uh, what are you doing about this? What do you want? You know, I want to feel better about my job. I want to be able to get up and go to work in the morning and what have you. What are you doing about it? I'm going home and drinking, right? Going home and drinking a lot. Okay. Is that getting you closer to what you want? Well, it gets stuff, you know, get up and go to work in the morning. Yeah. Well, is it hurting you or others? Yeah, it's hurting me, right? When I'm doing that. So not a good choice. Okay. So I have to find something else. Whenever I come up with this plan, my plan needs to be SAMIC. Okay. This is another thing that's not in your handout here. SAMIC stands for simple, attainable, measurable, immediate, consistent, and within my control. Okay. Some of you may be familiar with the SMART planning, right? SMART. Many of the same aspects. We just use the SAMIC, SAMICC. Is my plan simple? Is it attainable? Is it realistic? How am I measuring this? If I'm not measuring it, then I don't know whether I'm making progress or not, right? If I'm not measuring it. Oftentimes what happens is I use that emotional reasoning and I wake up and I'm feeling okay and I think I'm making progress. The next day I wake up and I'm feeling bad, don't think I'm making any progress. I don't know which one of those is true if I don't have a way to objectively measure it, okay? Is this something I can do today? Is it something I can do immediately? That means today. If I can't do it today, the plan's too complex. It needs to be simpler. Needs to be something I can do today. Consistent. Sorry, I was going through the SAMIC in my head. Consistently, is this something I can do consistently? You know, serendipity is wonderful. If opportunity knocks, you know, don't just open the door, but grab it and drag it inside. But serendipity is not a plan. Okay, take advantage of it if it happens, but I need to have a plan, something I can do consistently day after day after day. And is this something that is within my control? Okay. Oftentimes this is the problem. What do you know, oftentimes working with people, so what do you want? Well, I want a promotion at work. Okay. Well, who controls that? Do you control that? If you do, why aren't you already where you want to be? Right? No, I don't. Supervisor makes that decision. Okay. What do I control of that? Let's just sort of modify it to I want to show that I am worthy of a promotion. That's entirely on me, right? But I'm not the one who makes that decision. So I can't be terribly upset when somebody may make a different decision than I would. So is this within my control? That's the SAMIC. That's the action planning on that. Okay. The behavioral emotional domain. The reason I include both of these together is because the things that we want to look at here are behavioral skills that deal with pretty much emotions. Okay. Behavioral skills that deal with emotions. So these are some social skills. And let me tell you, you know, those of us who have the social skills think that everybody has the social skills, but talk to somebody in HR sometime. Okay. If you're not in HR, if you are in HR, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not in HR, let me assure you that not everyone has these basic social skills. Okay. So number one, don't assume they do. And number two, know how to deal with it if they don't. Okay. But make sure you have them at the very least. Okay. So some common simple skills are knowing my feelings. Okay. I can't be empathetic and understand and respond to somebody else's feelings, which is more of an advanced social skill there, if I don't even know what my own are. Okay, so I have to be able to know my feelings. Active listening is the basic social skill. This is another one of those that I may be very good at with work, but when I get home, maybe not so much, right? I may have to use that across a broader spectrum, right? When I do this. Dealing with anger, okay, that's a skill. Assertiveness is a skill. Oftentimes people think, well, why don't you confront this person? Why don't you deal with this problem? Well, I don't want to be aggressive on this. Well, you don't have to be aggressive. You can be assertive. Okay, there's a difference between assertive and aggressive. Okay, and people don't realize that. Many people don't know that I can be assertive without being aggressive. But that's a social skill that can be taught. All of these social skills can be taught. And they follow the form of the one below it, the arousal control skill. This is another social skill, but it just has steps to it like this. Pay attention to your thoughts and feelings. Step number 2, recognize that you're in a heightened emotional state. Number 3, place your hand on your lower abdomen. 4, start the diaphragmatic breathing that we did yesterday. Okay. So all of these other social skills up here, and there are many of these. The Prepare curriculum has at least about 100 of them in there. And like I said, if you've got it, you tend to think that everybody has it. Everybody does it. Take my word for it. Okay. Or go talk to your HR person. They'll tell you that people don't. Okay. So, but all of these can be taught through this same format here. I first became aware of these social skills many years ago. I was in Austin. I was at a pho place, having some pho, and 3 guys came in from across the street. 2 of them were wearing gray suits. So IBM used to have a big place over there off Burnett Road. And so obviously they were from IBM. And sat down, and 2 of them began to rag on this other guy. I mean, they were berating him. Oh boy, they were just tearing into him. I was getting upset, and I didn't even know him. It was just the fact that somebody would treat somebody like that in public, right? But the guy was doing pretty good. He was eating his noodles, and he was nodding his head, and every now and then he'd ask a question in a low voice and what have you. And then some years later, I discovered that, IBM has a manager training program. They still have the manager training program. Most of it's online these days, but back then, back in the 1900s, we lived back then. Most of that was done in person. And what it was apparently this third guy, the guy who was dealing with all of this very well, was in the manager training program. And you had 2 managers who were teaching him how to probably deal with anger, but also certainly do active listening, because he did a very good job. Looking back on it, he did a very good job of the active listening part of that. Okay. So all of these were things that, once again, we think other people have, but not necessarily. And they are so important that major corporations, major companies spend time and money on training their managerial staff in how to use these skills. Okay. So they're very important in everyday life as well. How I deal with people, especially if I've got this compassion fatigue, I don't want to use these social skills. Okay. That's the problem with the thinking traps, right? When I get in this, I don't want to use these things. Okay. But I have to, if I'm going to make my way through it and then develop some further skills to build my resiliency. But that's the reason I included both the behavioral and the emotional domain together, is because mainly in this part, what we're looking at is those social skills, those behavioral skills that deal with emotions. Okay. And once again, let me just tell you, not everybody has those. And if I recognize that I don't have one, I can learn it. Okay. I can go look for the, skill, just like the arousal control skill. And I can do this and develop that skill for myself. Okay. If I'm not using the active listening at home, I know how to use it, perhaps. Because I use it at work, but so I need to start using it there. If I'm getting feedback that I'm not using it any place, I may want to learn how to use that skill, right? The physical domain is another one as well. That includes getting quality sleep. I can't tell you how important sleep is to this. Disrupted sleep kicks off the stress cycle. Okay, so I want to get quality sleep. The best investment for that I can probably make is to buy an eye mask. Okay, well, there's masks that go over the eyes that cuts out light when I'm sleeping. You know, some of them even have. I bought my wife one not long ago. I think it had some lavender scent to it, right? So I can smell the lavender as I'm, it's over my eyes, covering up all the light and what have you. Helps to sleep. Certainly helps her to sleep better. Uh, Exercise is another one that I want to maintain that exercise. We know from the research, and this is fairly recent research, we've known it for a while, but had new research last year in 2023 that physical exercise is better than medication for dealing with the symptoms of major depressive disorder. Okay. So if I'm feeling some depression, I'm starting to get that compassion fatigue. Depression is a part of that, perhaps. Exercise, physical exercise. And, the side effects of exercise are a whole lot better than the side effects of psychiatric meds. Okay, let me just throw that out there for you. Uh, Maintain a proper diet as well. Yesterday, we talked about how when we become chronically stressed, that the cognitive executive functions in the brain are affected. It makes us, number one, it disrupts the sleep cycle. It makes us unmotivated to exercise, and it makes us want to eat unhealthy things that are going to make us obese. If you want to know why, you're gonna have to look up the look up the thing when Marty puts it out tomorrow. But all of these things are part of the physical domain and are how I develop resiliency. So if I'm not getting enough sleep, uh, good REM sleep, then in a dark place, then I want to do that. If I'm not getting exercise, I want to do that. If I'm not maintaining a proper diet, then I want to do that. That helps me build resiliency, helps me deal with all of these things that I'm taking on from other people, right? The other thing that we have is the existential domain, which is also called the spiritual domain. This includes things like cultivating gratitude. That's one of the aspects of resilience. It includes self-gratitude, okay, and self-compassion. So what are some things that we can do to help deal with that? Well, we can write people a thank you note. One of the simplest ways to show gratitude is to say thank you, right? So we just write somebody a thank you note. Now, I always have people that say, well, what if I just email them? I don't have to write it out, do I? Can I just email them? Yes, you can email them. Well, can I just text them? Can I just text them a thank you? Yes, you can text them. Thank you. Okay. And if I don't have time to do any of that, I can just thank them mentally. Now, remember that the reason I'm doing this is to develop gratitude in me. If I actually sit down and write it or send it to him or something, and then I'm promoting my relationship. So that's excellent. That's great. That's going to help me be resilient as well. But I'm promoting gratitude here. So if I don't have time to sit down and write something out, even a text, then I can at least thank somebody mentally because it's the gratitude that I'm working on. That's the important part here. Okay. Another thing is keep a gratitude journal. Now you may journal you may journal already, and that's fine. But keep a gratitude journal as well, or at least a part of that. Make it gratitude about gratitude, and then count my blessings. Okay. Oftentimes we achieve lots of things in our life that if I don't stop and take the time to look at them in retrospect, I really don't realize that I achieved them, right? I mean, on some level, I know I accomplished this, but I don't look at it in the big picture. So every now and then I just have to stop and look back on my life and say, I really wanted to do that, and I did it. I didn't really think about it, didn't really have a plan to do that, but a conscious plan to make that happen. But it just, it must have been an unconscious plan because it did work out. I did achieve that, and that's something that that I'm thankful for, that I'm happy for. So count those blessings. Take the time to do that. Once a week or whatever. Just sit down and write them out. These are the things that I'm thankful for. These are the blessings that I've had. If you're religious, you may pray. Okay, that also helps to develop gratitude. If you're not religious, then you can meditate. Even if you are religious, you can meditate. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Okay, meditation is a wonderful gift God gave us to use our own faculties. He gave us this wonderful brain, this wonderful body, to use in many different ways. And he gave us meditation as a way to recharge that, to develop some resiliency. So we can take advantage of it or not. We can let the machine run down. It's up to us. But meditation can do that. One common way to do this is something called mantra meditation. Okay, mantra is just something, a phrase you repeat over and over again. So you'll find this. And if anybody looked up the relaxation response, you'll find that he uses this as a part of the relaxation response. But I come up with a word or a phrase, a prayer, something that I find meaningful to me, that helps me relax, that helps me calm down. And I just repeat that over and over again. VA's been using this for quite a while, dealing with PTSD and things like that. So I can certainly use it if I'm starting to feel some compassion fatigue. I was at a conference not too long ago in Austin. Somebody from a hospice facility said, what would I do in a situation? I was doing the stress management thing. I was in a situation where, we're in a hospital room with a family members actively dying, and the family sort of starts to get upset. What could I do? Of course, my first thing was diaphragmatic breathing, have everybody do some breathing, take some deep breaths. But then I said, you might do this mantra meditation. You might not call it mantra meditation. You might just say, let's do this exercise, right? How would you like Uncle Bob to go out? Would you like him to go out with everybody being upset? Or would you like him to go out with everybody standing around the bed saying peace or saying love or something, something like that, whatever is meaningful to all of them, and all saying that together? Which do you think that he would prefer? And so that may be something, right? So we can use that to help ourselves calm down and to build some resiliency in our own lives, or use it as a technique to help others do that as well. Okay. 2 minutes a day is all this takes. Yesterday, I was harped on this 2 minutes a day thing over and over again. This is what we know from the research, okay, is that if I do these things 2 minutes a day, they increase happiness, which builds resiliency, okay? Write down 3 things for which I'm grateful every day. Write down 3 things for which you're grateful. Only take 2 minutes. That's it. 2 minutes. So set a timer, 2 minutes, write down 3 things for which I'm grateful. Journal about one positive experience I've had in the last 24 hours. That may be that section I'm doing in the gratitude journal, right? I'm keeping a gratitude journal about that one positive experience I've had in the last 24 hours. Only take 2 minutes to do that. 2 minutes of mindfulness meditation. Okay, that's all it needs to see positive effect. Don't have to do it for 45 minutes. Don't have to do it for an hour and a half. 2 minutes. Write a positive email to someone. Okay. If you can't do that, at least think mentally for it, right? Okay. But take 2 minutes, just write a positive email to somebody. Just take 2 minutes, okay, to do that. The physical exercise you're going to have to do for 10 minutes. Okay. 2 minutes isn't going to get you there. 10 minutes of physical exercise. Don't have to have an hour of physical exercise. Don't take my lunch hour to do that. Now, if you do that, that's going to be better for you. But to see some positive benefit, all we need is 10 minutes. I'm not telling you just to do 10 minutes. At the minimum, do 10 minutes, right? That's where we're going to see positive effect. Another thing is ikigai. I mentioned this again yesterday. Ikigai is a Japanese term that means a reason for being. We know that having a reason for being, a purpose for being, leads to greater levels of self-compassion. And that greater levels of self-compassion is a part of that spiritual domain that helps to build resiliency. So I put the link down on the bottom of here that you can go and sort of look at this test. And what ikigai does, looks at all of these different sections, okay? So it looks at what you love doing, and it looks at what you're good at doing. And those are not necessarily the same thing, okay? I've struggled with this for years, okay? If you're good at something, but just because you happen to be good at it, doesn't mean that you like doing it, okay? I used to ask, why are you giving me this stuff? Why do you continue to give me this stuff? They said, well, you're really good at it. But yes, but I don't like to do it. Well, we thought you liked to do it because you were so good at it. No, I don't like to do it. Okay, so just because you're good at something does not mean you like doing it. But it looks at both of those. So what I love doing and what I'm good at doing, then what you can get paid for, which is always very important in today's world, and what the world needs. So it looks at those areas, and then it looks at what you love doing and what you're good at doing. That's your passion. What I'm good at doing and what I can get paid for, that's my profession. what I can get paid for and what the world needs, that's a vocation. And then what the world needs and what I love doing, and that's my mission. And when you combine passion, profession, vocation, and mission, that is when you get ikigai. So this little exercise sort of leads you through some questions, asks you some questions to help you make sort of that spiraling journey there to ikigai, to recognize what your purpose in life is. Now, you may find that your purpose in life is to be doing exactly what you're doing, and that's fine because that sort of boosts me up, right? It says, oh, right, well, I'm not wasting my time anymore, right? So it helps me deal with some compassion fatigue, helps me build some resilience there, okay? Or it may very well tell me, you need to move on, okay? And that may be because, I'm retired. I may have had a real passion for doing something, a real mission for doing something in my life, and then that's sort of changed over the years. So sometimes that changes, and that can feel like compassion fatigue. So maybe I do need to move on to something else. But whichever way it is, it can be helpful to you, right? It either affirms what I'm doing, okay, or it tells me I need to be doing something else, okay? So that's the ikigai. It's another thing you can do to build resiliency. Okay, so that's what we have for that. Just a reminder, on the handout there's a survey and a link and a QR code. If you enjoyed today's studies, please fill those out. If you didn't enjoy today's studies, just send me an email and we'll talk about that together. But a lot of information on here that I gave you, some references and what have you, just for your own information. If you have any questions on the material, please let me know. Just contact me. I'd be more than happy to answer those for you. Or we can look at the questions here in a minute and answer those. If you have questions on CEUs and things like that, send them to Marty because I don't know anything about that. I'll forward them to him anyway. So back to you, Marty. I'll check the questions here.
Okay, so good. There's not much, but great stuff as always. But let me share my screen. But in the meantime, I'm going to say if you did not like it, sit with your dog for a little bit and just get it all out, and then after you practice gratitude and all the things, then you can fill out the survey and say good things, right? Sorry about. Okay, so let me get to where I need to be. So this is Dr. Mottern's contact information. That will actually be on the follow-up email. But let's talk about if you joined us today for CEUs or if you're looking for a certificate of attendance. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is please fill out Dr. Mottern's survey for him. I know how important it is for us to get ours. I know it's got to be equally as important for him. And he needs to hear the kudos, of course. And so if you'll do that, that link will be in the follow-up email. And there's several people that have put in the Q&A and that kind of thing about the slides for yesterday's because they weren't here. I will include a link to the slides for yesterday's in the follow-up after today's. So both links will be in there. So for those looking for CEUs, we're providing CEUs for licensed social workers and licensed professional counselors in the state of Texas. If you have a different license in Texas or you have a license outside of Texas, feel free to go through the process, get a certificate. But please note, there's just no guarantee that they're going to take it. But I have had people say they've been able to use them. Also, we're providing certificates of attendance if you're interested in one of those as well. Today's webinar is worth 1.5 hours of CEU credits. You must have completed the entire live webinar and are still hanging on with us. We go till 3:30. Unless there's not a lot of questions, we finish early, but you need to at least get to 3:30 if as long as we get there. You must also complete the Google survey. That's really important. There's two different surveys. There's Dr. Mottern survey, and then there's the Google survey that we put out. Both of those links will be in the follow-up email. But if, as you're closing out of Zoom today, it should ask you if you would like to take a short survey. That is our Google survey. If you take it then, that's great, or you can take it by using the link in the follow-up email. The survey will be up for a week from today, and the 26th. And then if you give us about 4 weeks to get those certificates out to you, I'm getting caught up. But and just remember, I get a lot of emails. Not I'm not the CEU provider for all of the webinars that I put together. There's other partners, but I am the CEU provider for this webinar. So if you have questions, reach out to me. And if you have questions about the other ones, you can reach out to me as well. But I do provide the CEUs for this. So, Dr. Mottern, what did you find?
Yeah, there were one question in there was, is compassion fatigue or burnout diagnosable? That is it billable? There's no diagnosis in the DSM that covers compassion fatigue specifically or burnout. EAPs from the other end, you're asking if it's billable, so you're probably asking it from this end. But yeah, we would definitely, if it got to that point, we would definitely be diagnosing it as something else. But if you're struggling with it, and you're worried about that part, if you can get it paid for, that your EAP, your Employee Assistance Program, probably has something where you can go and take advantage of that, where it's not going to cost you anything. So for either one of those, for either compassion fatigue or for burnout. So if you're working someplace, and they have an EAP, that would be the place to go. So you wouldn't have to. You can get at least, most of the time, you get at least 3 sessions for those. They can teach you some very good skills and what have you for your specific situation, and do that. If you're on the other side of that, and you're trying to bill for it. Sorry, neither of them are quite bad enough from the APA standpoint to be considered for that. Another one, somebody had mentioned the sleep masks in the comments there. They were talking about Manta masks. That may be the one I got my wife. I don't remember, but it sounded like there was some good comments on those, so you might look those up. Let me just remind you that any amount of light, okay, is going to disrupt that sleep cycle. Doesn't mean you're not going to sleep. Doesn't mean you're not going to have REM sleep. But something like the melatonin in the body, we think of that as helping us to go to sleep, which it does, but it also has other functions in the brain after we're asleep. Okay. And any amount of light will disrupt those functions. So I may sleep, may have good REM sleep, but everything that can be done is not being done to help me be as resilient as I could be. So I encourage, once again, the sleep mask. Sounds like some people had that down there as well. I think that was about it that I saw in there.
That's great. Well, I want to throw out that we're doing. Dr. Mottern referred to the one on burnout, the webinar we're doing on the 30th, and this is for anyone, but it's basic. It really applies to organizations, and so if you are having a problem with burnout or people you work with, this would probably be a very good one for your HR people or your managers or the people that are that you work under. And so I encourage you to help us get the word out to all of them about that. And if you don't want them to know it's coming from you, just send me their email address and I'll send them the
flyer. As far as the burnout one goes, it can be helpful for individuals because, there are generally 6 different mismatches that'll cause burnout between the employees and the job itself. So it may be helpful to individuals if they're feeling burnout, just to know that, okay, well, this is where I'm starting to experience the burnout because I'm mismatched in this area right here. And so that may help people identify that particular area. So they may try to then talk to their supervisor, managers, or whatever, to make some changes in that area. So it can, for just the individual employee, be useful as well.
Yeah, and I had originally had the title avoiding burnout in organizations and in professionals, meaning for the individual. But somebody told me it was a duplication because organizations are just groups of individuals. So, but as Doctor said, it's good for anybody that's interested individually but it's probably really good for your organizations if you can figure out a way to get that information to them. Anything else, Dr. Mottern?
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mottern. for all of you that are still on, I'm sure you know Dr. Mottern actually has a group of fans that always ask me when are we going to hear from Dr. Mottern again. So we're very grateful to you. Very grateful. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us, and you all have a great day. Look for the follow-up email that's going to go out here. It'll go out in about 15 or 20 minutes. I have it almost ready to go. So thank you so much.